So, like, again, like, consistent with basically my theory of, like, you know, them wanting me to be dirty is, like, accurate. Like, my hygiene kit went missing, and then my fucking, like, my doorstop went missing. So, like, I walked into a stall, and I went to block the door with my fucking doorstop so that, like, I could use the stall that doesn't really get used very often, so it was probably cleaner. And my doorstop's missing, so, like... Okay, so, like, one of the annoying things about, like... drop-in shelters, like, I think it's amazing, you know, that you can go and get free food or whatever, but the problem is, like, right now, I'm going from the train station to the drop-in center area, and, like, it's not that quick of, it's not, like, it's a pretty quick journey if you're not in rush hour. So, like, the thing is, though, their meal serving times are, like, kind of in the middle of, like, rush hour. Like, I'm, like, in a sea of people right now, like going from point A to point B, and it's just like, it's completely unnecessary. It's like, I don't care. I'm just like, it's inconvenient, you know what I mean? Like, so you're, like, and if all the drop-in centers, like, relatively have the same sort of thing going on, and the funny thing is, the ironic part is, like, the two drop-in centers I'm visiting, 5:30, it's like 5:30 is probably the busiest time on Queen Street, which is when that drop-in center is operating, right? And then the one that's nearest the train station is open at around, or for dinner, is open at around 7 o'clock. And that's more the nightclubbing. So it's actually like, the one that's closer is actually open in the rush hour for that specific area. So, like, both rush hours of the drop-in centers or whatever are basically, like, in the busiest times for those areas, pretty much. And then, like, if you're in the train station leaving to go to either of those areas, it's rush hour. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, just kind of, like, personally annoyed, like, and I'm like, yeah, but also, like, maybe something for drop-in centers would be good. It was basically, like, kind of like notifying people essentially, like, of that kind of micro issue with regards to just, like, the homeless population. Like, if they're in if they're in a state of avoidance and they just need to chill, right? They just want to chill somewhere. They can't really, like, chill and just, like, not be around people at all times, you know what I mean? Like, I don't care. Like, I'll be around people. If you want me around people, like, I will be around people. Like, don't care. But, like, I think, like, for everybody's benefit, like, if the homeless population or the vulnerable community was allowed to just, like, basically go to their sources of, like, free food at whatever time they needed or wanted, you know? I think there'd be a lot of basically, like, unnecessary stuff just, like, completely avoided. So, like, you know, instead of they're dealing with the stress of basically, like, trying to get across the city, like, in rush hour, they're just, like, you know, if they're working on finding a job, or, like, doing personal maintenance, or doing whatever, like, they can just go and get their food, like, or supplies or anything, like, you need, like, anytime that you want. You know what I mean? Because if you go to those same drop-in centers, you can get your health kits with regards to, like, your safe needles and your safe pipes, like, 24/7. But if you want to get food, you got to go at certain times. And I'm like, it's a little bit, like, that's a little bit, like, pretty inconvenient, and in my opinion, you're kind of just, like, basically incentivizing, like, something that's a lot more costly and more self-destructive and harmful. So yeah, you're enabling, at the drop-in centers, you're prioritizing drugs opposed to prioritizing food. It's like, you wonder why people are doing drugs. I'm like, yeah, like, I can't blame them. You know what I mean? Like, if the drop-in centers are making drugs more accessible, and the the ability to do drugs accessible, then like it makes sense that people are making the choice to do drugs instead of like eat food. And this, if you miss your mealtime or whatever, like if you arrive late and they don't have what you need, like so like if you arrive late and you don't have your fucking hate reality. Like I got off just now like at the wrong fucking station. I'm in fucking King Station. Like why am I at King Station? So I'm going down the stairs because I got off the train at the wrong stop and now I'm getting back on the train. I'm like, why is that? Like fucking human trafficking system. So it's like I stopped bitching and complaining, Harley. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with basically providing feedback. And if you're gonna censor me because I'm complaining, it's just like plenty of comedians do it, and everybody laughs their fucking ass off when comedians are doing it. I'm like, all right, like, I'm sure that like, the comedy of the situation or whatever is not necessarily like entertaining to like the people who are surrounding the area or whatever, or like, but like depending on the context, if it's a screen and then it's directed at a targeted audience, like it will be funny. You know what I mean? But like, probably takes a lot of work to be funny, and then the people who are around you might just be getting pissed off because they're like, it's not the time or place to be bringing it up, right? Like if I'm bitching about the TTC, like in the TTC, then like, they're like, what are you doing here? Get out of here. And I'm like, fuck, where? You know what I mean? If I'm on my way to a warming shelter, or if I'm on my way to a drop-in center, and I'm talking shit about the fucking drop-in centers, it would make sense that I have a hard time getting to the drop-in center right now. Like, I'm literally being deliberately fucked with to get to the drop-in center right now. Like, why is that? Maybe it's because I bitched about them on the way to them. But realistically, it's not like... Food is different, right? Like, the health kits are... Like, I'm talking out of my ass because I don't necessarily know. So, like, the health kits are non-perishable, right? They have expiry dates. The needles and the naloxone kits or whatever have expiry dates that last like up to a year, so they can be stored in mass or whatever, and like they're not like they don't have to be stored in a fridge or whatever. And I'm like, I get it, like, so yeah, it makes sense that like they just give food out at certain times, you know what I mean? But at the same time, like, I'm pretty sure if we just had like kind of like a bulk barn system, or like the bubble gum machines where you just like twist stuff, or like you go to those hotels and you have like the twist knobs with the cereal or something. And you just had a system like that where people could just like, they show up to a place to get food and they just get their food, like either way. It might be like cereal or something, but like at least they got cereal. They didn't have to have like a, I think that'd be cool. And then there is non-perishable food that lasts just as long as like a naloxone kit or a fucking meth pipe or a crack pipe. Like, it's all good. Yeah. And the other thing is like, I'm pretty blessed because like I was able to basically like get to the, I had a position of fortune or whatever, and I was able to like reach the right conclusions, I think, like before shit hit the fan, and then like when shit hit the fan, I was like psychologically prepared, right? So then when it did hit the fan, I was like, you know what, like, I was like, okay, like, I basically did my due diligence, and you know what, like, not everybody, to my knowledge, is like afforded that just like, I want to say privilege, because yeah, that's pretty cool privilege. It's like being thrown into a not so nice situation and being able to like, you're uncomfortable, but you're physically uncomfortable. And you're able to see that it's uncomfortable and how unsustainable it is, and like how it's just sort of like circling the drain, but also like you're psychologically prepped for it. so you're not actually like making situations too much worse for yourself. You know what I mean? So like the only way I pretty much thinking that I make situations worse for myself is like I swear all the time. You know what I mean? Like I will totally swear all the time. And like security, or police officers, or staff members in hospitals or drop-in shelters like handle themselves like pretty professionally and do not swear. You know what I mean? Like, and you know what? When I was volunteering in a fucking shelter, like I was not in a position to swear at the clients or patrons, right?
Next
Because I was
stop,
like,
University Avenue.
yeah, like
Allspeed subway station.
I understood that if they were mistreating me, it was because like they're probably dealing with a lot of fucking bullshit. Because like I didn't need to necessarily be homeless to kind of see the position that was going on, and I was going like, okay, well, I don't have this. I was like,
Please look right
not
for
equipped to
traffic
necessarily
exiting.
help with it, but basically handing out food I don't think is necessarily helpful either. So I don't get it. Like, it is somewhat helpful, but I don't know, like in terms of effectiveness in dealing with it, like you know, like people should just have access to. I don't know. Like, if it's about food stamps, like just give them. You know what I mean? So like OW was like, or all the drop-in centers are like, here's a ticket. Here's a
Next
TTC
stop,
ticket.
St. Patrick Street.
I'm like, I don't need a ticket. I need a pass. And they're like, well, if you're with OW, we'll give you $142 a month or whatever. I'm like, yeah, a pass costs $150 a month for unlimited. You know what I mean? I'm on the TTC like over unlimited. By the way, can you just like take that money that you would give me, the $142, and just give it to the TTC, right? And then just put it in my name so that when I speak to a ticket officer at least twice a month, they're like, you know, like
Please look right for traffic.
they go like, oh, well, we looked you up and like, you know, your OW funds were redirected to your, or we're paid to the TTC directly just from OW, right? And then, but I think since I said that, like the TTC fare officers have not given me any problems.
Next
Like,
stop, John Street.
it's just like, why are we giving false problems? Why are we making problems? And then like, when the problems are introduced, the solution is already ready-made. It's just like, it's just annoying because I'm like, there's already a solution to this. Like, why are you bugging me with the problem if you have the solution to it? And I got memory problems, you know what I mean? It's like, can we address my memory problems first? You know? Like, why are you trying to teach a dory fish how to, like, you know, find a Nemo? Like, obviously the dory fish is not going to find a Nemo, you know what I mean? Like, it needs help. Like, oh my god, like, I'm just a companion. Like, I'm literally just like a buddy system. And I'm like, why? I was like, why am I the one? Because I'm like, you know what? I'm acknowledging. I'm not the one learning the lesson here. I'm just like, I
Please
am.
look right for traffic when exiting.
The only lesson I'm learning is to not get frustrated, but like everybody's losing their cool with me, and I'm like, understandable, you know. But I shouldn't have left the hospital, like, but they keep kicking me out of the freaking hospital. I'm like, assisted dying, please. Like, they're just gonna keep kicking me around. Like the definition of insanity is kicking someone around and expecting a different result, you know.
Next stop, Soho Street.
We want you to be more than a ball. It's like, pretty sure you kicked all my brain cells out. But it's not a bad thing. Like, I don't actually mind not having brain cells because I don't actually feel things. Like, I'll laugh just now, but like, that laugh is not actually representative. That's just me not breathing enough. So like, when I'm laughing, I'm just like breathing more. You know what I mean? They're just like, well, we need you to actually use your lungs more. So like, we're just gonna like kind of invent sort of semi things that could be laughed at. So like, you laugh at them and then you're breathing more, opposed to just like emptying your lungs constantly from like talking or lack of breathing. Right? Same with the whistling thing. Like, you were doing deep breaths when you were whistling. You were doing deep breaths when you're yelling on the street. You're doing deep breaths when you're like laughing too. You know what I mean? You're also breathing more when you're having conversations with people, even arguments, you know? it's all about keeping you breathing. Because, like, it's not cool to have people just walk around, like, literally turning blue, not breathing. Something that I thought was pretty accurate with regards to, you know how I was saying, like, earlier in my earlier videos or whatever, that I was like, yeah, like, I would have outbursts, and my outbursts of anger would be controlled. So, like, controlled release. You know what I mean? So, like, basically, like, I'm getting riled up, rightfully so, and I have to actually, like, basically let it out and deal with it, right? But they're controlling when, right? And I have a problem with that. Like, I'm getting angry that they control when I'm allowed to feel anger, right? And deal with it, right? Because the other thing is, it's another form of, I'm basically angry about the control they have over me with regards to my anger, right? And my reason for being angry. So, like, my reason for being angry is control, and then, like, my reason for being angry is control, and they also control when I'm allowed to express why I'm angry. So, like, it's like a double whammy right there. So I'm like realistically, I'm like, holy fuck. And because they're so dominant in their control with regards to just control and when I can express that they have control, they have me down pat, like, to the point where it's like, you know, like, they can screw me up with just, like, literally the click of a thumb. You know what I mean? So they already know. They know what I'm doing before, like, I'm already doing it, right? And then I'm like, and then they're just bullying me essentially when they just, like, use my thumb. They're basically like, you know, because I don't understand how phones work. You know what I mean? I didn't design and build the fucking phone, right? And I acknowledge it's an amazing tool, right? But I acknowledge that it's not a tool that I'm familiar with how to use, right? So basically, like, you know, if we look at history or whatever, like, you know, basically the indigenous folk of North America or whatever, they weren't necessarily familiar with alcohol, and basically the settlers came along and, like, introduced it, you know, and then had the trade system, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, like, I think like over 3/4 of the indigenous population died straight away due to basically, like, bugs, right, or, like, biological stuff, right? And then the rest are kind of like, you know, they're like, oh well, you know, if we dabble with these settlers and, like, you know, we can, you know, try to make peace with them, you know what I mean? They'll, like, you know, show the settlers the peace pipe, and then the settlers give them alcohol, and then, like, you know, basically, like, yeah, the alcohol was, like, I don't know, pretty addictive or whatever, and just, like, just to basically a society that's not used to it or whatever, they just get ruined, right? And I'm thinking, like, you know, I'm conditioned to basically, like, I think that's what's happening with basically my phone, you know what I mean? It's not necessarily, like, a bad thing. Like, I think I have a little bit of problem, like, moderating, basically, like, the use of my phone, right? But it doesn't mean that, like, it's, I acknowledge I have a problem, like, moderating the use of my phone, right? But at the same time, I'm like, it's totally a tool to control me. It's not like, and monitor me. It's like a baby monitor, essentially. But, like, you know, it's like, it's something it's something that, whatever. I think the interest is basically, like, protect the herd with diversity, right? And, like, that is the intent, I think. And then the other problem is because the protection is so strong that, like, I'm pretty sure, like, I guess this is my most positive spin on it, because the protection is so strong that, like, it has the ability to basically, like, choke the life out of you. It's like okay, and after they choke the life out of you, they're basically, like, you know, dominating or asserting their power, and they're just like, you just have to submit, right? And I'm like, okay, well, you know what, like, house pets are pretty amazing, right? At the same time, like, you know my stance on house pets, like, I'm not down. So, like, yeah, so it's like, I don't want to be like a house pet or like a planet pet to like the aliens, basically. Which I know like are totally real, or like these like super old, like talented. Like I'm not saying they're like, I'm just saying they're like so talented that I'm like holy shit, like I can't deal. I was like, I can't deal. At the same time, I'm like mercy. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, like I don't want to say like, you know, submit and mercy, like, because those are, that sort of language is basically like, that sort of language encourages basically stuff that's, I think like negative and suppressive, and like, you know, at the same time, I'm like, I'd rather like empower people, and I'm like, yeah, like noises are amazing. I'm like, why don't we just make noises instead of like, you know, basically like trying to communicate what's going on? Because like, I'm just using the Queen's language, and like, I'm like, it's the Converse freaking language. It's like the dumbest thing. It's the dumbest language to be using. They're basically like explain, like, I can't knock the colonial system with the fucking colonial language. You know what I mean? I just get fucking torn apart every time. It's like no point. There's no point, right? I'm like, okay. And at the same time, I'm not interested in tearing apart the colonial system, because I'm like, you know what? It's been around a lot longer than I have. So I'm like, goodbye, right? Yeah. So I'm just, yeah. I'm on my way to next emergency department, because I'm tired. I'm like, you know what, guys? Like, and I'm just gonna get more tired after visiting the emergency department where I'm going. So like, you know, like it's interesting, the foreshadowing that's going on. It's like there's a construction crew fucking like working right outside the fucking emergency department. It's just like, yeah, it's like there's no rest. Like the whole term, like no rest for the wicked or whatever, like that's not accurate here. It's just like they don't. I'd say there's no rest for like basically the people they're trying to distract. You know what I mean? Like, and we can call it a synchronicity, I think, at this point. Like, it's not, it's just like the synchronicity is a schedule, and it's not my schedule, it's somebody else's schedule. You know, like, whose schedule am I on right now? It's just like, well, everybody wants to be your enemy, you know what I mean? Like, because when you're an enemy, you're like, they're like, oh, well, then, you know, if you think we're your enemy, then, like, you can, you know, essentially, like, you're essentially, like, justifying, like, our intervention, you know what I mean? Who's my enemy? Myself. That's why I'm trying to fucking get assisted suicide. Like, you know, and I don't fucking discriminate with who I talk to about assisted suicide. Because, like, I'm done. You know what I mean? It's all okay. Like, everything's okay. Like, you know, like I'm literally, like, I'm, like, celebrating my life, like, before I'm dead, you know? That's how it should be. Celebrating, you should have your celebration of life, like, before you're actually dead, you know? You know, and it's like, it should be, in my opinion, it should be like totally at your expense. You know what I mean? Like, and realistically, like most of my life has. So I'm like, yeah, just like give it away. You know what I mean? Just give it away, give it away, give it away. Right? Like at all times. And so I really don't like that. I just came from a hospital. And like they saw me relatively quick, and then I was like in the mode of basically getting a little bit of rest there, and I was like, yeah, basically they incentivized basically me lying, right? Like I'm in REM sleep or whatever, and then they're like, hey, I'm the doctor here to see you, and I'm like, fuck, you know what I mean? But like I'm like, okay, you know, and then at the same time I'm like, hey, like, thank you, right? Because that's what I'm here for, right? And then at the same time I'm like, so what's the problem? And I'm like doing my best to explain the situation to a doctor that I've never seen before. And then to a nurse that I've only seen once before. And then I got removed from the security. I got removed from the waiting room by a security guard who I've never spoken to before. And I lied to the security and the doctor with regards to saying that I was hungry, right? I was like, okay. At the time, I'm like super tired, and I'm like, you know what? Like, I want to just like continue resting, basically. And it's always useful to have more food. The thing is, like, you know, hospital food sucks. So I came to the emergency department like fully fed, right? And then like on my way out, I was like, yeah, like, you know, I was literally like, you know, like security, you gotta provide people with food. So you know what, like that security guard's like less likely now to essentially like want to provide food like voluntarily, just like he just did. You know what I mean? He's not gonna want to provide food like voluntarily, just like he did, because it's like not as there's basically like the problem is what was I thinking? So like most of the security staff that I've spoken to, when I'm like, hey, can I get food? They immediately go like, yeah, we don't have that. And then they're basically like, you know, without checking. And I'm like, how's that possible? You know, I mean, how do you know what's in the fridge like before you've even gone to check, right? And it's like, oh, well, we just know what's there ahead of time. So I'm like, because to me, it's like, are they lying before they say that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't actually know, because like, in my opinion, it feels more like they're lying and they're saying like, no, we don't have any food, right? Before I'm given the chance to basically before I'm given the chance to, yeah, like, so I'm like, hey, like, do you have any food? They just go like this is my dietary restriction / preference, and they go like, yeah, we don't have that. And then the amount of times that's happened, I'm like, wow. So like, I'm basically like, for whatever reason, I basically like, you know, I told the security, I was like, I'd like a meal before I go, you know. And then I was like, literally, he shows up with the meal all polite and stuff like that, like very courteous, and he's like, here's your meal. And I'm like, you know what, I fucking lied. I was like, straight up with him, I was like, I lied. I was like, I just want sleep, you know. And then I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure like I'm being woken up periodically during like my REM sleep in the hopes that like I attack someone, right? You know? And I'm going like, I was trying to explain to him, I was like, yeah, like, I have nightmares. Like, literally, my biggest nightmare is basically just waking up at all times. Like, so it's like, yeah, problem is, like, I was like, yeah, worst nightmare come true, like, every time I wake up. Like, I'm like, yep. And then, but, like, you know, they don't understand, because they're like, wait, what? Like, yeah, it's about context. Like, not that they don't understand, or like, maybe they do understand. Maybe they understand perfectly. Maybe they've already been through what I'm currently experiencing. I'm going like, you know, I'd rather empower people. Like, but at the same time, I'm like, well, if you guys didn't make it with regards to assisted dying in your attempt to basically, like, you obviously had a good time and you want to stay. So I'm like, but I do not. But if that's going on, that like, you know, the hospital for whatever has the wrong idea about you, and they're basically like, well, you know, just periodically like monitor his vitals while he's in here, basically like induce sleep, you know, get him to feel tired and relax, reward him with getting a little bit of sleep, and then literally just wake him up periodically while he's like close to REM at all times in hope of getting a negative reaction. You got a negative reaction. I lied. I asked for food. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, like, I'm hungry. Can you go get me food? Like, in an effort to stall, basically, to just like rest that extra minute. You know what I mean? Because he's paid to be there. The security guard was paid to be there. Right? So I'm like, I'm not paid to be an emergency. You know what I mean? I'm not even volunteering being in an emergency. Like, I'm in a state of emergency, and I'm like over it. Security was not necessarily the problem there, like, and I don't even think the doctors or the staff were the problem there. You know what I mean? They actually had me in, like, even when I'm not even allowed in the building. You know what I mean? Because they're like, yep, we're not going to take you in here right now. Like, they're not the problem. Like, my staff is not the staff at all times. Everybody around me at all times are not the problem. Like, even if they're at the point of like punching me in the face, like, they're still not the problem. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that went into this that, like, yeah, it's like, okay, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna snowball the situation? Are you gonna make people around you the problem? So like, okay, we're gonna do that. Like, here's a can of whoopah. Like, no, they do. But at the same time, it feels like I'm the problem because they're going like, you're the problem, you need to leave now, kind of thing. And I'm like, but I don't think they, so like, it's procedural and they're dumping me out. And if I put up a resistance to basically the procedure, I become a problem. But it feels like when procedure is activated with regards to me leaving or whatever, it actually just feels like I'm the problem, like as soon as I get on the property. And it's just like, how do I, they're basically just going like, how do we piss this guy off enough like so that he's not coming back here? You know what I mean? Like that's what it feels like every time. I'm like, I arrive in the hospital emergency and I'm like, okay, they're just gonna continually grind me slowly. Excuse me, I'm deaf, homeless, and a person with no family, work, please help me with some money. No, thank you. I don't have any money. Sorry. Yeah, pretty much is what it feels like. It's like the system of the city / the hospital system with regards to denying me, like assisted dying is basically just like, oh, like let's see what we can like get Harley to compromise on. You know what I mean? Like we're the network and we're the procedure. Like we're gonna grind him into the floor with regards to like getting what we want. I'm like, call for what it is, because like literally just like grinding me, and I'm like, what's it for? You know what I mean? I'm assuming like the way they're participating, I'm assuming is because they've been ground into basically following procedure. That's the only explanation. So yeah, like they might have been like brainwashed into following procedure, so that they have like a, I don't know, like they could have like basically like incurred having dependents or whatever, like before they got the position, or they had motivation to basically like acquire a position that is that has like heavy procedure or whatever, so that like they're just like in a constant state of basically like following procedure. It's just the thing is like I'm not a paying client. That's what's crazy, like where it's just like I'm not a paying client right now. Like, so that's the thing, like essentially like when I was doing construction or whatever, and like a pedestrian came up to me and had a problem, I'd take them very seriously because I was like, hey, this is the community, right? This random stranger who's not a paying client, right? They're essentially like a random person. Like I don't know who they are, right? Like if I'm working on the street or whatever, and some pedestrian comes up to me and goes like, hey, like I got a problem with what you're doing here, like work-wise, like just for your awareness, like this is going on. You know what I mean? I'll be like, okay, like a member of the community just approached me. They volunteered information. They're unpaid, right? They're not paying me, right? So I take them like very seriously. Right? Whenever I was working, whenever I was doing construction, and like, a pedestrian came up to me, and I was working privately, you know what I mean? I'd be like, hey, like, I was like, straight to the boss. I'd be like, yep, or my supervisor. And then if I was a supervisor, I'd be like, okay, very carefully, like, be mindful of the community. You know what I mean? Because like it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, like I don't care. Like the company, my parents' company, for example, like is a small company. Like they're not some giant like publicly funded thing. You know what I mean? So like you got to be careful like whose toes you step on, right? Like, and at the same time, you don't know whose toes you're stepping on at all times, right? So it's just like a pedestrian could come up to you and they could be a neighbor, right? Right? Or they could be a friend of the client's. So you're just like, hey, like, please, like, so I'm like, okay, like, and I'm like, well, yeah, I don't necessarily think it's, yeah, so basically, like, I don't know what to do. Basically, like, I'm pretty sure the right thing to do is assisted death. And if I'm not getting assisted death quick enough, right, there's a serious problem. This should have happened way before I've been asking for it as of this last, as of the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023. Like, it should have happened, like, way before, like, I fucking met Fallon, way before I met Elizabeth, you know, like, way before, like, yeah, because, like, realistically, it's just, like, I'm like a light that's slowly going out, opposed to just, like, you know, it's a grind. It's not, it shouldn't, like, towards the end of your life, it shouldn't hurt, right? And I know I sound like I'm pretty, like, happy sometimes and even, like, pissed off or whatever, and I'm like, and even kind of, like, emotional, and, like, I can understand how someone might appreciate that and also benefit from it, but I'm like, you have no idea, like, I'm explaining that, like, this should have happened a long time ago, and it's just like, yeah, what am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? Other than be peaceful about it. So, like, yeah, and I explained that some people don't actually, like, the excessive force or whatever, the excessive force is so excessive that they're able to basically keep you alive. Like, you know what I mean? They're not actually interested in killing you. And I wasn't interested in doing anything harmful to anybody to deserve death, right? Like, or like accidentally provoke, like, a death, right? Aimed at myself mostly. Like, I'm not interested in doing anything like that, and I'm actually pretty much having it verified that they're actually interested in inciting me to do that, you know, where I'm, like, provoking people into killing me or killing someone else, and I'm like, that's like, I was like, because in my 211 armband visits so far, like, I have seen, like, I think, yeah, the worst injury I've seen is essentially, like, things that are long-term, like, disease illnesses that have, like, physical symptoms. So basically, like, yeah, I can't, trying to remember his name, but he basically has, like, and I can't really divulge, like, stuff about fellow patients or whatever, but basically, like, they have symptoms that are basically, like, very clearly, like, stuff is physically very wrong or very different from like, what a body part should look like, or what a couple body parts should look like, and I'm going, like, okay, like, and I've seen them consistently over the span of, like, 2 months. And they're basically exactly the same as the first time I saw them. And I'm going, like, wow, this condition is not getting better, and to my knowledge, like, they're having a really rough time with it, right? And the other thing is, like, it looks like they haven't showered the entire time that I've known them. And I'm like, where are they coming from? What's going on? You know? And I asked him, I was like, hey, like, what's going on? And he's like, don't worry about it. He's like, basically gave me the look where it was just, like, too much to explain. And I'm like, and I was like, okay, you know what? I was like, yep, you're fighting your own battle here, and, like, you know what? Like, it seems like a losing battle. You know what I mean? At the same time, I'm like, yep, pretty much seems like I'm a losing battle too with regards to getting assisted dying. I'm like, so basically, the multiverse. The only way that this is possible, that someone, like, the system, like, the 3 hospitals that I go to are too many hospitals. So if there's at least 150 staff members in each hospital, so that's 300, 450, that's 450 people. It's 450 staff members that I'm supposed to familiarize myself with and use my memory to, like, get to know so that like I treat them better. It's 450 people I have to learn to treat better so that like they actually get all on the same page eventually and go like, yeah, you know what, I actually think Harley's not kidding, and I actually think he's not, like, just to, like, for basic things, you know what I mean, like, oh yeah, that's Harley, you know, he's in here requesting assisted death, and like some of them have like actually taken me seriously right from the get-go, and then the ones that have taken me seriously right from the get-go, I hardly ever see. I literally hardly ever see the ones that I see. So what I think is happening is somebody understands, somebody like in the system, like way higher up, is sort of looking down, and they're going like, yeah, like any hint of like empathy or understanding, and then they target the people who I actually receive like empathy from, and then I generally don't see them. Like, how depressing is that, right? Where you're like, there's literally people in the hospital system who I saw like within the first few visits. I can't really remember them, but like occasionally I might see them again, but like in general, like I can remember like one off the top of my head who I've seen twice, but haven't seen since, you know? And it's been at least a month since the last time I saw them. You know, and then the last time I saw them, they're like, I remember you, like, yeah, like I totally support your decision. I was like so sleep deprived. I was like, thank you. And then I was like, I looked like I was stoned out of my mind, but I was like literally just sleep deprived, and I'm going like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, word, like, and then they're basically like, I'll be right back, and then they go, and then they come back, and like, you know, and then I never saw them again. And like realistically, so what can end up happening is basically like, so like I've described to the hospital system, to multiple people in the hospital system multiple times, that like I was honest with my request for assisted dying a long time ago, and then I was targeted, in my opinion, and then just like literally like sabotaged in terms of taking any kind of movement in that direction, right? In fact, I had like basically like traps set to basically like end me up where I am now. So like I'm concerned when I'm like meeting people, like legit concerned, like when I'm meeting people in the hospital system who are empathetic, because I'm like, what if they display signs of empathy and then also like understanding and support, and then they get targeted. So like I'm essentially being used as a tool to identify the people who would totally help with assisted suicide. That's what I feel like is going on, because like I literally don't run into the people who are supportive of assisted suicide. Like I run into the people who are not supportive and like don't necessarily like most of the time, like of the 200 and like, you know, 10 visits that I have like logged or whatever on my own account, like, you know, 30 of those visits, or like, you know, not 30, like I want to say 20 of those visits were a total waste of time, because I literally walked in and then get turned away. You know what I mean? You get walked in and turned away by someone who doesn't like, who literally is going like, they're like, no, I know what your problem is, and you don't need assisted dying, and by the way, like I think that's wrong, and like that's not our job, and that's not procedure or whatever. And I'm going like, oh my fucking god, like, and I'm like, okay, like, you know what, you just basically like, I'm like, okay, so like basically they support the people who don't support me. The people who do support me end up like getting far and few between, like in my emergency room visits, and I'm in my emergency department visits, and I'm like,
And meanwhile, I'm like most of the time too fucking sleep deprived to even like figure out how to advocate for myself, right? And it's just like, and I don't support drama shows. Like I'm like I need to like I want to be like super scientific about it or whatever, and I'm like okay, like let's be super scientific about it. And try to basically like create like a journal that's accessible to everybody, and then when it's accessible to everybody, like we're all on the same page, and then like yeah, so literally there's not a war on killing people, there's a war on sabotaging people who support people's right to choose life on their schedule. That's what it is. They're basically like, if you're a free thinker and you're like wow, by being a sheep, I'm essentially going with the herd, and I'm enabling a system that is like designed to basically like take, right? And yeah, they're basically like, well, we like our sheep sort of innocent and stupid, right? Which is like totally fair, because if you were a farmer or whatever, and like you had like a like a group of sheep in your herd or whatever that's misbehaving, like you'd probably like, in my opinion, like isolate them from the herd and then just use them somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like okay, there's just like fenced in pasture over here that like, you know, these sheep that do not want to be herded by the fucking sheepdogs or whatever, like just stick them over there, you know what I mean? And then like, yeah, like when it's like getting close to eating sheep time or whatever, like we'll eat those ones first, right? Is kind of what's going on, I think. But it's like not necessarily like I'm not being eaten though, you know what I mean? I'm being kept alive. Like I'm like, why would you keep me alive? I don't want to be here. You know what I mean? It's just like, well, in my opinion, it's like a breeding program. It's just like, oh, well, he was extremely effective when he was doing construction, right? When he was a younger person. And yeah, he was like extremely brainwashable, and then like because he's extremely brainwashable, like, you know, like he was he had these sort of influences, like we tracked like every sort of influence that he had or whatever, and then they were like, okay, well, based on this conditioning, like we got this result, right? And then yeah, for like track record purposes, like if studies can be ongoing and multi-generational, if studies are ongoing and multi-generational, because like they are, pretty sure like some research projects, I'm pretty sure like have been going on like a really long time, right? Like, and I think we're actually, everybody is part of that kind of research and development, you know. I wouldn't say that anybody's excluded from like that sort of research and development. I think we're all actually included, like 100%, right? People are like, oh well, that's, you know, that's too complicated, Harley. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's like I agree, like that is too complicated. So like we make simplifications with like, you know, religions or whatever, and like certain philosophical ideas, and yeah, and certain fairy tales and fantasies that we get brainwashed with, and then I think it's okay to go. I'm pretty sure it's okay to go, and like we should definitely like. I'm like really concerned. I'm really, really concerned because I'm like, the people who are keeping me alive, I'm like, if I know them, I don't recognize them, and I go like, wait a second, guys, like, I don't really recognize my family members right now. Like, this is kind of like ridiculously concerning. Why don't I recognize some of my family members? Like I shouldn't be doubting whether or not like their identities, which I identify as my family members or friends. Why is there some serious differences with regards to what's going on? And I'm like, okay, like, you know, if they are who they say they are and who I identify as being like people I've known in the past, then I'm the crazy one. That's just like, okay, so like they're looking like it's like a very, I don't know. So it's like I was like, okay, like am I causing a problem? Like, not really. The only problem I'm causing is basically like not being. So once I'm like in the hospital and then I'm outside, like and then I've like gone through the procedure of basically like, you know, collecting, like they were like, okay, he's here, we'll collect information on him, and then after we're finished collecting information on him from a certain window, like after a certain window has expired for collecting the information that we, like, he's here for, like we'll just send him away, right? Because I think it's holistic. Like, in my opinion, the emergency department is everywhere at all times now. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't like, I'm just like, I would like to like engage basically the emergency department, like at a hospital in the emergency department, right? But I don't care anymore because I'm going like, if I'm going from emergency to emergency, everything in between is still the emergency department. I don't care. And like everybody's my doctor. Everybody's a potential like legal representative. Everybody's a friend. Everybody's a family member. Everybody's a friend. Everybody's a family member. Everybody's a doctor. Everybody's a therapist. Everybody's a child. Everybody's a grandparent. Like I'm like everybody's the same. I'm like you know what, like